Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into today's video. Well, this is it. This is the final and official winter 2012-2013 forecast from GavsWeatherVids.com for the United Kingdom. Through the autumn and for the last 6 months, actually, I've been looking at various things, trying to build up a picture of what's going to happen, or what I think may happen in the United Kingdom this winter. And this is the conclusion of all of those videos that we've been looking at. Now, before I get on with the video, I just want to mention the advertising, because there'll usually be a video ad overlaying my weather videos at GavsWeatherVids.com, and do please play those video ads, because you'll be supporting GavsWeatherVids.com by doing that. I also want to mention Gav Shop. You can go through to Gav Shop and click on the Amazon banners, go through to Amazon.co.uk, do your Christmas shopping there, and you'll be supporting GavsWeatherVids.com at the same time, and thank you very much for doing that. So we've been looking at various things through the last 6 months to try and build up a picture for this winter. I've been looking at the seasonal models. I'll be doing a seasonal model roundup once a month for the last 3 months, looking at the winter. The last seasonal model roundup was last week, actually, and you can see the video just underneath this video here on the seasonal page at GavsWeatherVids.com. If you want to recap on what happened in that video, then have a play and you'll see what went on. But I'll just quickly say that the seasonal models were generally quite split, really. The signal had backed off from October, when we had a very, very strong signal for a cold winter. It was less so this month, or last month now, I should say, November. But there was still just about a signal amongst those models for a colder than average winter. So yeah, the signal was still there through November, in the November update, for a colder than average winter, but it was less strong. The signal was less strong than it had been in October. So if you want a recap of that video, to watch it again and see which individual models were going for which scenario through the winter, then do please press play on the seasonal model roundup video just underneath this one, and you'll be able to do that. So let's run through the things we've been looking at through the last 6 months. The first thing I started off with was back in June, actually, which was the Atlantic sea surface temperature anomalies, with a view to how they may impact the winter. Now, when we've got a tripole in the Atlantic in May, which I'll remind you again is a warm, cold and warm band, if that occurs in May, that can signal that it will reoccur again as we get through to the winter, and a tripole is a decent signal for a negative NAO. But this isn't a constant idea. You don't want to ping too much on this. This is really just very much a starting point. We didn't have a tripole anyway in May. We had a signal here for a more positive NAO type setup, because we didn't have the warm, cold and warm band. So this really did point towards a positive NAO for the winter. You can see this video again, by the way, on this seasonal page. But as I say, don't put too much credence into this. I said it at the time. This is really just very much a starting point. You can't put too much emphasis on that. It's not to be relied upon. So as we move through to what we've been looking at through the autumn, we start off with the sea surface temperature anomalies. 3 areas specifically: the ENSO region, the signal here in the Pacific that tells us what the PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, is doing, and then the Atlantic. So we can see that we have had quite a bit of warm water through the ENSO region, but not enough to get us to a designated El Nino. It's almost certainly going to be an ENSO neutral winter. The PDO has been cold through the autumn, but if we go back to the PDO in May, we had a very, very cold PDO there. It's backed off quite a bit, actually, through the autumn. We've not got an extensively cold PDO, but we are still on the colder side. And then as we move through to look at the Atlantic, we can see we had a very good tripole here, the warm, cold, warm bands. This is a tripole. This is what we was looking for in May, really, to signal a negative NAO for the coming winter. We didn't have it in May, but we've had it through the autumn, the warm, cold and warm bands. We've been quite cold up here over the northern Atlantic between Iceland and Scandinavia. So there's no particular signal coming out of the Pacific. It doesn't look as though the Pacific is going to be a major player this winter. the signal there is really quite weak, although we are still just about hanging on to that cold PDO, and we're likely to stay in the cold PDO for a long time to come. But that's not a constant, by the way. You do swing with that, so whilst you're maybe in the cold PDO phase, you can go back actually temporarily into a warm PDO type setup, but it won't last long when it'll go back into cold again. But for the Atlantic really has been very nicely indicating a negative NAO, and it continues to do so as we move through into the winter. Now we've still got that tripole, so certainly for the first part of the winter, you have to say the Atlantic is nicely set up for a negative NAO. Now, could that more positive type pattern start to re-emerge as we go further into the winter? It could do, I wouldn't rule it out, but this is a strong signal from the Atlantic for a negative NAO, so I think this does carry us at least through the first part of the winter, and it does really indicate that we should be seeing increased blocking around Iceland and less of an Azores high type influence. Now moving on to solar activity. Solar activity currently is low, it's weak. This is the current situation on the solar disk from solarham.net. All of the websites in this video, by the way, can be found on my links page, so go to the links page and check out these websites for yourself, the links to the websites, and then check websites out yourself. This is the situation with solar disk. It's low, weak solar activity at the moment, but we did get that spike in the solar activity in November. This is the spike that occurred. We have the most active period on the sun for about 12 months actually through November, and of course we're nearing solar maximum now. I've been explaining this in the videos. We've got close to solar maximum. It may have occurred actually about a year ago. We may still have it to come, but we're around the solar maximum period, and whilst we've plunged back into very weak solar activity just at the moment, there's the red line with the current sunspot numbers plunging back down, we can see that as we are around solar maximum, these spikes in activity can occur, and when that happens it can just niggle the jet stream a little bit, so that possibly does tell us that we can expect periods through the winter if we get many of those spikes of more unsettled type patterns. But generally the solar activity is weak. It's going to be the weakest solar maximum probably for a century, so really the sun shouldn't be too much of a problem this winter. Now, as we move through to the stratosphere, we've been looking at the stratospheric temperature over the North Pole. Of course, a cold stratosphere can come inside with increased westerliness in the mid-latitudes, so low pressure around the Arctic and Greenland can coincide with increased westerlies across the Atlantic into Europe. Otherwise, if you get a warm stratosphere, that can coincide with blocking over the pole and more of an easterly or northerly influence down, in towards Europe and the mid-latitudes. Well, the stratosphere has been very cold through the latter part of December. We did through November, I should say, we did plunge through November, had a record-breaking cold stratosphere, but now it's come back up, and as we've gone in towards December, that stratosphere is beginning to show signs of warming. This could probably be because the stratosphere got so cold in November that really it's got nowhere else left to go, but definitely there's an uptick in the temperature in the stratosphere at the moment. I'm not saying this is the start of a stratospheric warming, I wouldn't go that far, but certainly signs that the stratospheric temperature is beginning to uptick a little bit. And of course, if we get a warm stratosphere, that can coincide with more in way of blocking over the pole. So that's a good signal, really, if you're looking for blocking up over the Arctic. The next thing we've been looking at is Arctic sea ice and snow cover. Now, this was the situation on the 1st of October. Catastrophic melt in the Arctic, of course, with the Arctic sea ice. It really was dreadful, the melt season this year, and I'll explain that it's weak, it's not well understood, it's not been well observed, but that does seem to coincide with increased blocking. Whereas into Siberia, actually through the start of October, we actually had less snow cover than would normally be expected, but snow cover exploded as we went through October. So this was the situation at the end of October, a massive increase here across much of Siberia Siberia back into Russia as well. A very big increase in snow cover over Scandinavia as well. I said at the time it was significant. I think it was significant. This would definitely, this increase in snow cover, help to get the Siberian high going, lay the groundwork for that Siberian high, and I think it's done that actually, and we are seeing now signs of blocking beginning to take shape earlier than would normally be expected in the winter. I think that's largely really down to this very, very dramatic increase in snow cover that we had through October. Although it lessened off a little bit, particularly across Scandinavia and Europe in November, the groundwork was really laid in October. I think that is a very key indicator for blocking across much of Eurasia through the winter. Now this is the current situation when I'm doing this video, Saturday the 1st of December, and we're about where we should be now. We've got good cover over Scandinavia, as we should really at the time of year, though maybe a little bit more than we'd be expecting. And we've got snow cover now extending through pretty much the whole of Russia, and as I say, that is really where we should be. So that is in a way comforting to see, but it's not particularly significant. The significant part actually occurred through October. In terms of the Arctic sea ice, we've come back nicely. It's refrozen, but of course all this is weak, so it does mean that the ice may well be vulnerable again next summer, but let's not worry too much about that just at the moment. And then I've been talking about the patterns as we've gone on through the autumn. So let's just have a look at how the autumn has panned out. September, this is from the Met Office, by the way. These anomalies are from the Met Office. This is the mean temperature anomaly for September. It was a cooler than average month pretty much across the whole of the country. For precipitation in September, well, it's wetter than average for northern England, a little bit drier than average in the southeast, many places actually near normal precipitation, but the temperatures were significantly cooler than average in September, and it was actually the coldest September, or the coolest September since 1994 in the central England temperature zone. October was even colder actually for Scotland, a significantly colder than average month. Less so for England and Wales, but really all parts of the country were below average with those temperatures through October. Precipitation was quite interesting as well, because we had above average precipitation down in the southeast and below average precipitation up to the northwest. That's quite unusual to see that. But it was an unusual pattern probably, that also explains the temperature anomalies. Now I can't show you the anomaly for November because it's not up yet, but this is from Philippides Climate UK website, climateuk.com. This is just for the central England region, but it shows us that we've had another cool month. It has been a little bit below average. Precipitation well above average, 127% of the average in November. Been a really wet month, explains all that flooding, of course. So the autumn has been cooler than average, and rainfall has come out a little bit above average as well. So if we start to think about putting everything together now, the signal I think really that we've seen through everything we've looked at is for a colder than average winter. Now there's some caveats to put into this. I wouldn't necessarily say it's going to be a severely colder than average winter. I'm not sure we've seen the evidence to suggest a severely colder than average winter. Of course, you've been seeing in your newspapers recently a lot of forecasts going around talking about the coldest winter for 100 years. That's impossible anyway, by the way, because the winter of 1963 was the coldest since the winter of 1740. So if we was to beat 1963 with this winter, which is implied of course by the coldest winter for 100 years, then we would actually be talking about the coldest winter for 270 years. But realistically it's very, very, very unlikely that we're going to beat 1963. And the reason I say this is that there's a few little niggles there that do suggest that as we go through the winter we may see some milder interludes. One of the problems of course is the solar activity. We're near to solar maximum. We can, as we saw through November, we can get these spikes in activity, spiking up solar activity, and if that happens that can just niggle the jet stream a little bit and start to bring a more milder Atlantic changeable type pattern in and break down some of that blocking. And the other problem is the sea surface temperature anomalies from May. Whilst I don't put too much credence on them, if we was to see that negative NAO signal that we've got in the Atlantic currently waning off in the middle and latter stages of the winter, I think there's enough of a signal there to suggest a negative NAO, certainly for the first part of winter, for December. I think the signal is good. But if we started to see that waning off as we go through into the middle and latter stages of the winter, then again we could start to see that blocking beginning to break down. So I'm not sure the evidence is really there for a severe winter with a continuous sort of cold pattern going on for months and months without any milder interruptions. The signal for that, I'm not sure really it's quite there. But I think everything else we look at does suggest a cold winter. So the Atlantic, well set up for currently. The snow cover in October was very significant. That was a big player, and that does very much tell us we should be seeing blocking established, and it is establishing from Siberia up into the Arctic. That was a very significant development, and I think that does imply that we should be seeing colder than average type winter. The Pacific, not a particular player. We've not got a strong La Nina. That would suggest a milder winter. We haven't got that. We've got a neutral signal, so we shouldn't see too much influence from the Pacific. So yeah, I think really we are looking at a colder than average winter, but with milder interludes coming along. Now, how that plays out in terms of those milder interludes, I'm not able to say with my methodology. Certainly I think we're looking at a cold December, some milder interludes likely, but generally quite a cold December. Beyond that, I would expect that we start to see somewhat milder interludes, perhaps coming into January maybe, and then later January into February we may start to see the cold coming back, then perhaps a cold waning a little bit later February, and then getting into the end of February and into March we may see it turning cold again. So it's kind of that waxing and waning type winter with regular cold intervals, enough to make the temperature, the mean temperatures below average. So cold and average winter, yes, but occasionally and sometimes we see that cold backing off, and periods of moderation of the cold coming along. So a very interesting winter actually, this one. It's been hard to get this together, this forecast. The signals have been, particularly through November, the signals have been really playing around. And remember, this is just for fun. It's just experimental, really. But the GavsWeatherVids.com forecast is for a cold and average winter for the United Kingdom. And in terms of precipitation, finally, the signal isn't strong. But usually, if it's cold and average, you can expect it to be drier than average as well. So I would expect rainfall to come out a little bit below average, although when we get these periods of moderation of the cold, we probably then get some quite heavy rain coming in as well, and maybe as the transitional periods take place, some heavy snowfall also. Well, that's it. That's the forecast from GavsWeatherVids. I'm just going to finally leave you with a written summary, just so that you can recap on everything that I've said in this video, because I know it's been a long video, it's been a long haul. The whole of the autumn really with these videos has been a long haul, so thank you so much for sticking with me, and I hope you found it interesting and informative. So I'm leaving you with a summary from GavsWeatherVids.com of the winter of 2012-2013. Thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed the video. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.